time for Wednesday's hour number 2 on Hashtag Daily K with your host, Peter Bint. Korean dramas, movies, and even lyrics. Why is the world paying attention to Korean stories?
From classics to modern masterpieces, time to dig deep into the charms of Korean literature.
On Check It Out
with Paul.
It is the new autumn season here on Hashtag Daily K, but we've still got Paul Matthews, we've still got Check It Out, we've still got great literature.
What? Why?
Fabulously translated.
Why have you kept me? I've been here for over 2 years, Peter. What's going on?
You're part of the furniture, and we couldn't find any guests to come in on Wednesday, unfortunately.
It's like 2.5 years now.
We're not running out of books because they keep writing them, okay? As soon as...
we may well run out at some point, Peter.
If we do, then maybe we'll switch things up. But until then, by listener demand, you are back again, Paul.
Oh, well, I'm very pleased to be back. Thank you for having me on my fifth is it my fifth consecutive season?
I don't count anymore,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 consecutive season.
Nobody cares
I care.
Number season it is, as long as you're sitting
there.
there.
I want to break the Arirang record for longest guest.
I wonder what the record is.
I don't know. 2 meters?
The longest Arirang guest. Maybe Chairman. He was pretty tall, wasn't he? Do you remember him? The host of Not Daily K. What was your show?
Catch the Wave. I took over from him.
Of course you remember him.
Yeah,
great friends.
Yeah, great friends. Yeah. Always in touch. He likes sport, doesn't he? Yeah.
How's your week been, Paul?
I've been busy, Peter. I've been back down to Suncheon, to wonderful Suncheon.
Lovely.
Directing my show there. I'm a busy man at the moment.
Are you still at the Seoul Arts Centre on the weekends?
No, that's all done.
Okay.
I'm doing other performances, like I went, and this is really interesting for me. Okay, and maybe for the listeners too.
Probably not.
For the first time ever last Saturday, I had performances in Pyeongtaek.
Oh, that's my mum's hometown.
Okay. Now, and for those who don't know, Pyeongtaek is home to one of the big military bases, Camp Humphreys, the American base. And so I was actually performing literally 300 meters or so from the gates of Camp Humphreys.
Oh, wow.
In this little town that sort of serves the American Army community.
Wow.
And I'd never been there before. And it was the most amazing, interesting place because it was like Korea and America colliding and melding and mixing.
Wow.
Interesting signage. Lots of interesting restaurants and other shops and places. And I have to say, I was fascinated. And also, our audience was half American, half Korean.
Oh,
so it was
lovely.
an international experience. And I have to say, it was fascinating.
Pyeongtaek, I went to so many times when I was growing up, and it did rely a lot on having the US Army there for years. And my mum used to say, some of the kids would run after the American vehicles to get chocolates and stuff thrown at them. Not these days, I feel, anymore.
I don't think anyone's throwing chocolates anymore except for Halloween.
There you go, maybe at the end of October. Today's book, it is an author we haven't featured on the show as well.
No, first time featuring Bae Su-ah. With a translation by Sora Kim Russell of her novella Nowhere to be Found. So I'd like to apologise to Bae Su-ah. We've never managed to feature on the show before. There is a little bit of issue is that we always get permission from our translators.
Yeah, personally, right?
Yeah, we need to get copyright permission so we can use their translations and do these excerpts and promote their work. However, there's one particular well-known translator who's translated some very popular Korean books, and we've never managed to get in touch with her and ask her for her permission.
I think we're going to her spam mailbox automatically.
Possibly. And she's translated quite a bit of Bae Su-ah's work. However, I discovered that Sora Kim Russell had also translated this. And if you happen to belong to a certain South American river-based website where they do unlimited reading.
Oh,
this book is actually available for free.
Oh, nice.
On there if you have that subscriber plan.
Oh, is there a plan that you can get where you get unlimited access to certain works?
To certain works.
Oh,
and this is one of them. So just a heads up if you want to read it for free and you happen to have that service.
Okay.
So it's a really, really interesting book. It's only 60 pages or so it's a short read. And we get into the really quite dark and difficult existence of a young woman back in 1988.
Here in Korea?
Yes.
Okay.
And she tells us of her recent life, of the hardships she's been facing, and of her failed relationships.
Interesting. Tell us a bit about Bae Su-ah then, featuring her for the first time.
She's a fascinating writer. She had a very different start to many other writers, but born in Seoul in 1965, she majored in chemistry at Ewha Women's University, and then she ended up working at Gimpo Airport on the desks there.
Oh, wow.
And she would write stories in her spare time. Sort of, it was just a hobby.
Okay.
And then she got one published in 1993, and then she got more published and more published and more published, and she's become a really significant writer in Korea. So we've got 3 of her novels now have been translated into English by Deborah Smith, and Ms. Smith, if you're listening, please do get in touch for copyright
Give us permission, please.
There's today's novella. There's another short story that Sora Kim Russell has also translated, and there's another short story translated by another translator. So quite a bit of her work is out there.
Nice.
And I'm looking forward now to diving into her other stories, because this one is really fantastic.
Great.
She's been recognized for basically creating her own literary style. This book, if you do read it, is unlike other Korean authors we've covered before.
Oh, in what way?
She really gets into the psychology of the main character, and she has some interesting literary techniques. I don't want to spoil it too much. And she also is not afraid to tackle some very difficult topics and issues.
Lovely. If that's your cup of tea, well, you can judge on today's readings, which we'll get to in just a second. Sora Kim Russell, we've even had her in the studio. Lovely. And a wonderful translator.
A wonderful translator. This is one of our older works. It comes from quite a fair few years ago. But it's always great to visit any of her translations. I do worry that at some point we're going to run out of Sora Kim Russell. What are we going to do? Translate more, please.
Keep going.
She's a brilliant translator. She's also a poet and fiction writer in her own right, but translation is her main sort of job these days. She's translated, tens of short stories, something like a dozen Korean novels so far. And she's brilliant. If you want to check out her work, my favorites are her translations of Pyun Hae Young. And I will keep on saying that because The Hole and City of Ash and Red are brilliant horror stories, and I'm a huge horror fan. I know there's one book of hers we haven't featured yet, which is short stories by Jun Sung-tae.
Oh.
So I'm going to bring that in this autumn for sure.
I'm looking forward to that.
But if you see her name on the cover or in the inside front page, you're in for a good translation.
All right, so we got the seal of approval for today's reading. We're picking it up at the beginning of the book.
I know you like to pick it up there, so that's where we're going to pick it up.
Thank you so much.
In 1988, I was temping at a university in Gyeonggi province. Mostly what I did there was send lecture requests to part-time instructors, make adjustments to their class schedules, mail them their pay stubs, and field complaints from students. As far as the work went, I didn't have any major complaints of my own. It was the kind of clerical work that anyone could have done without any special qualifications or expertise. As long as you had a decent memory and an elementary work ethic, there was nothing to fear. In other words, it bore no resemblance at all to the type of job you could get only after having studied hard for years and years, turned in thousands upon thousands of pages of reports, written a tome of a thesis, earned a degree, and created a winning resume composed entirely in English. At this job, we could chew gum or do our nails while answering the phones or take over 2 hours to type even the sparsest syllabus. We weren't lazy or indifferent or anything. It was just the nature of the work. The office got a lot of visitors, so it wasn't unusual for me to make more than 20 cups of coffee in a single day. Of course, it was muddy instant coffee. Every person and every procedure marches on at a measured pace. That's how things get done. Just as the less delicate components of a machine submit to the will of the machine without any conscious thought or shred of volition while being steadily ground down. So while I was busy not having any conscious thought, I became a cog. The office I worked in was not a place where revolution happens, nor should it have been. The general ethic there was of loyalty to one's assigned task, whether that meant stirring 20 cups of instant coffee or fielding requests from professors for photocopies for the purpose of solemnly achieving that ethic itself. Though that applied only to the members of the lower classes, of course. When I put it that way, you might think I'm being cynical. But that's not it. The work didn't bother me, except, of course, for the little things, like having to ride the bus for over an hour to get there and having no hope of ever getting a raise since I was only a temporary contract worker. As for my friends, one was a government bureaucrat, another had just started working at a brokerage firm, and another was teaching in an orphanage. But most were unemployed. It's possible I harbored a vague sense of fear back then.
Welcome to Arirang Radio.
If you are in Jeju,
88.7 in Jeju City.
88.1 in Seogwipo City.
101.9 in the Daejeong area.
Arirang Radio.
We are back for part 2 of the show. Check it out with Paul in the studio. We got a couple of messages. Jerry Osborne says, the part about suddenly realising you've become a cog in the wheel is very relatable, I think.
Yes, I think there's a lot of people who can relate to that moment in their lives. Tropic Girl saying, sounds tough, precarious times. The narrator seems torn between appreciation for the job and fear of being unemployed at a moment's notice. Lesson, no matter what your lot, always put your best foot forward, 120%, always. No quiet quitting for Tropic Girl.
I don't know how I felt about that reading, like whether the character was really like depressed or just kind of accepting that as life. You know, she didn't seem very critical about things, you know, saying it shouldn't be a place where revolution happens or anything like that. It's just people, you know, being loyal to their job, to their task.
We have to remember it's 1988, and what did students do in 1980s?
Okay, a lot of revolution.
A lot of protests. So I think there's a subtle reference to that there.
I also feel, from what you told us about the actual writer, maybe some of this is autobiographical in a way, maybe inspired by her, you know, studying really hard to chemistry.
I hope it's not inspired by her life.
Oh dear.
We're going to get into a little bit of a dark place here.
Oh,
because
no.
things are not great.
Okay.
And the main character's not hopeful. She's 24. She's stuck in dead-end jobs. She's temping here at the university. She's working in restaurants at night. She's the only person in the family who went to college. But yet she's not been able to sort of go up the ladder.
Oh.
Her brother, who's 10 years older than her, works for a janitorial company. His plan for the future is to go to Japan.
Oh, yes.
To work as a janitor.
Oh.
Her sister, who's 10 years younger, is filled with dreams that are never going to come true. Mm-hmm. Her father's in prison.
Oh, no.
And her mother's an alcoholic.
Okay, that's a bad family setup there.
Yeah, so she's working numerous jobs to make ends meet. And like, for example, when her sister says, I really want to go on this class trip, everyone's going, we're going to go on a plane. Give me some money, please. She gives up basically eating lunch for a month to make sure her sister can go on the trip.
Oh, so she's doing it for her family.
Yes. And then we learn about her relationship with Chol-soo, her boyfriend, and the time when he joined the army doing his military service. And they have a bit of an odd relationship. They date other people, but they've always just sort of stayed together. And when he comes back on furlough and sees her, he's angry at her at first. He says, why didn't you reply to my letters? You know, I sent you letters. Why didn't you write? But then they go to his family home and they talk and no one's around and they have a quote-unquote romantic moment, which is quote-unquote less romantic than perhaps she hoped. And also interrupted by the return of his mother, who may or may not have noticed what was going on, romantically speaking.
Dear.
And then his mother interrogates her as to what she does and her family history, and as quickly as she and Chol-soo can, they escape the questioning.
Wow.
And then suddenly in the next chapter, we are confronted with something completely different.
Oh, a turn, so to speak. Let's get to our second reading.
If you gently stroke my lips and the palm of my hand right now, you will find them strangely cold and icy. A feeling of endless distance that even I can sense. Someone once said to me, you're so cold that I shake with despair. The whole time we're together, your lips never once flush, and your body is like slippery ice. You have the eyes of a wolf girl whose heart has never once been moved. When I press my ear to your chest, I hear only wind and emptiness. Rain falls inside the dark, abandoned house. It streams down the walls of the kitchen and the front door like a waterfall. Burn me. Pour gasoline over me and set my body on fire. Burn me at the stake like a witch. Wrap me in garbage bags and toss me in the incinerator. I'll turn into dioxin and make my way into your lungs. Stroke my face lightly with a razor blade and suck the blood that comes seeping out. Lap it up like a cat. I want to be covered in blood. I'll cry out in the end and weep for fear of leaving this world without ever once discovering the me inside me, the ugly something inside me. But then I see her. Another me passing by like a landscape of inanimate objects outside the window of the empty house, quietly collapsing in the rain. Where have you been all this time? Were you off somewhere singing, putting cats to sleep on the porch, drifting about in the rapids of time, the glow of the morning sun and the rain of a summer afternoon beating down as you pass by, your lips shut tight like a blood-sucking plant? The me that is nowhere to be found now. The me that will turn to ash and vanish, turn to darkness and rot. That me extends a squalid hand at the final moment of this crash, having entirely deserted and abandoned my life. In truth, I was not me. The me that was born into an animal body and lived as a slave to poverty and insult was nothing but the emptiness that had been momentarily bewitched out of me by an evil spirit. That distant me is precious and beautiful. No matter how decadent and corrupt my body becomes, I will, like a desert orchid that blooms once every 100 years, come to you bearing this frigidness toward life. I tell him, all you have is my emptiness.
Well, that was very different to the first reading.
I said it was going to be.
It was completely bland, just run-of-the-mill in
Bland?
the office.
Are you accusing Sora, Kim Russell and Bae Su-ah of being bland?
Maybe deliberately so.
Oh, Peter,
Blandness
you're
in
in
the
trouble. I'm
extreme.
going to message her after the show.
This is just really almost difficult to listen to, let alone read.
I'm sorry, I'll try to read it better next time.
What is this? Is this like really what she's wanting? What's actually happening? Who's she talking to? The guy who told her she was like full of wind and emptiness, or Cholsu?
It's her future.
Oh,
And we'll get to that at the end of the story.
okay.
And then we're back to Chelsea doing his military service.
Okay.
And she's promised to visit him. And his mother calls her and says, oh, please take him his favourite cooked chicken. I made it for him. He doesn't want me to go to the base, but you can take it. And she really doesn't want to see the mother again.
Oh, dear.
But she feels like she has to. So she picks up the chicken from the house, has an awkward moment with the family, and then travels far north of Seoul, all the way up Line 1 to the army base, Yeoncheon up there. When she gets there, she's told that Kim Chol-soo is out on a training exercise. And she's like, what? And they give her instructions, says, I'll just take any bus and then get off at this place and you'll find him.
Oh.
And she goes and she gets on a bus, but then finds out that's not the right bus, even though they said take any bus. And then she has to take another bus and it takes ages to find the place and it's freezing cold. And to make matters worse, once she gets there, he's not there.
Oh.
The other soldiers tell her there are two Kim Chol-soos. One's in hospital and the other skipped the training exercise.
Uh-oh.
So she's got no choice but to head back to the base in confusion. And there, she finds Chol-soo waiting for her, a bit annoyed because she's late and he's chatting with his friends.
Okay.
And he doesn't believe her explanation. He's like, no, there's only one Kim Chol-soo. Mm-hmm. And then he wants to share the chicken with her, but she's disgusted by it and she's had enough. She refuses.
Oh.
She breaks up with him. She throws his chicken into the military latrines and she leaves.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. Finally, her brother has managed to scrape enough money together to go to Japan.
Great for him.
Yeah, and they spend one last afternoon together and they take a photo to commemorate the moment and he promises to write and send money. And of course, he never does.
Oh.
And her and her mother are making Christmas cards to send to people in prison.
Oh.
And her mother wants to talk about Chol-soo. She's like, no, it's over. I don't want to talk about it.
Oh, dear.
Her mother is also trying to get her father out of prison. She's contacting churches and all sorts. Meanwhile, her father wants them to send poison of some kind. Poison the paper so he can eat it and die.
Oh, no.
And her sister decides she wants to be a lesbian so she can be in a whole new world. because this world she's living in right now is not a nice one, not a happy one.
Interesting decision.
And she tells us that was 1988. That was what happened in that year. Mm-hmm. Similar to 1978 or 1998.
Oh,
it's all the same.
It's kind of written in the future, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And she tells us her brother never wrote. Her family had to move out of their place. Her sister lost all her hair. And she says it was due to sadness. Oh. But I think it's maybe an allusion to cancer.
Okay.
Something like that. And then we're back to that moment of that second excerpt. She takes a man, we don't know who he is, to an old, deserted family house. It's dusty and dank, and she allows something awful to happen to her.
I hope not the awful that she was talking about in that second excerpt.
Download the Arirang radio app on your device for free.
It's Arirang. Arirang Radio.
He and I walk out into the waterfall of rain. Number 16 is empty again and left to the country of mould and spiders. On rainy nights like this, people linger in their houses afraid to so much as breathe too loudly. He and I are hungry. Let's go get something to eat, he says. I hate chicken. Anything is fine as long as it's not chicken. The rain flows along the streets, down to the low spots. In silence, we pass the lonely, deserted main drag, the neighborhood under redevelopment where the subway construction is not yet finished, the old apartment complex, the street with the rundown bars. From the vending machine at a closed gas station, we each get instant coffee and share a joint. The filter keeps us from getting too high, so we have no problem driving. I'm not that into this, I say. Then where should we go? He asks. The Rose Garden. That's in Thailand. It's on the way to Yeoncheon. Yeoncheon is too far. You want to drive all the way to the border? It's not as far as the border. We'll be there in no time. Long way to go for a bite to eat. There's nowhere else to eat at this hour. Clouds drift through my head. Blue sky so deep you'd never know the end of it. Clouds from Africa, a slow-moving breeze, thunder and lightning. Pacing in front of a gas station on a night as black as lacquer, an hour where even the radio is silenced by rain. I finally spot the Rose Garden. It is older and more run down and out of place in this world. Bricks line the grey dirt courtyard devoid of even a single rose bush. He parks the car in the lot and says, "What the hell is this? It's closed!" The whole world has quieted down because of the rain. Figures of people appear and disappear in the darkness. One woman and two men. The woman is wearing large baggy pants and her hair is dyed wine red. The men are wearing basketball shoes. They look rough like hoodlums. It is so dark out that I see them brushing past the car like ghosts, but he does not. I realize then that I have brought him to the center of my bleak hour. He leaves teeth marks on my arm that will outlast memory. I look at his white hairs. When you die, I'll have you taxidermied. Then I will have you forever. I will spend the light of morning and the despair of midday and the lunatic peace of evening with you. Never will you lie at rest in a royal tomb. And that is how I became an absolutely meaningless thing and survived time.
What? What's going on there? I'm a little confused. Does she kill him? Is she talking to him? When you die, I'll have you taxidermied, or is she talking to herself?
I think she's talking to herself about him.
What's going on? Okay. So what is this place? Do we find... Is this where it finishes?
It's the center of that sad moment, that sad day when she went to Yeoncheon to visit Cholsu.
Okay. This is what happened?
Yeah, she's brought him back to that bleak moment in her life.
Who is this guy? Some
We
random guy?
We don't know.
Okay.
Could it be Chol Su? I don't think so. Is it a stranger? I don't know. Is it her partner? I'm not sure, but he does terrible things to her.
Oh, in the story. Okay.
Yeah. So we never find out. But the point is, she is nowhere to be found. She has become a meaningless thing. She's gone from this world.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and it's a gut punch of a story. It's bleak, it's powerful. It has you empathizing for her, for all she suffers through. She gets trapped in a life she never wanted. She had the way out. She was the first in her family, the only in her family to go to college.
Yes.
And yet, that didn't save her. It should have saved her. It was meant to save her, and it did not. And we have to remember 1988 was a really strange time in Korea. The 80s were a time of rapid change. So many events, social and political. Korea was preparing for the Olympics, transitioning into a democracy, going through rapid economic and industrial development. And everyone got caught up in this. But if your house was in the wrong place, it would get demolished to make way for the new apartments, and you wouldn't get properly compensated.
Oh, dear.
If you didn't get the right job, you were shoved aside into temping or restaurant work.
There's no hope.
Yeah. We look at Korea now, 2022, cultural powerhouse. You talk about being desensitized, Peter. I'm not desensitized because I read these stories and I think the stories behind Korea getting the success. It's amazing that we've come here, but we should never forget the people who have suffered on the way, those who were left behind in the wake of progress, who were promised success and victory and everything and ended up nowhere and nothing.
Oh, wow. What a real brutal story. Oh, I mean...
I like to cheer up your Wednesdays.
It can be a bit depressing. You can think, went to college. It should be all roses, like, moving forward. But it wasn't. That's no guarantee. People can fall by the wayside. And you're right, that's so far removed from the success we see on our screens today, but definitely linked.
And it's not her fault. And I think that's the thing that I look at what in the UK, for example, there are some right-wing politicians who blame the poor for their circumstances, who say it's their fault, they're lazy, they spend their money on cigarettes and widescreen TVs. It's nobody's fault to be in that situation. It's society's fault for letting people slip through the gaps.
Yeah, wow. And that is the bleakest of endings. I did not see that coming at all.
Well, this is why I want to read more of Bae Su-ah, because this is just a very short novella, 60 pages, not long at all. I want to read her longer works. I want to find out more about her writing style, because this has intrigued me.
Tropic LK saying, wow, are we really products of our environment? Frigidness towards life. Just listening to that makes me feel a bit down. And yes, a lot of people go through that hours and hours, maybe commuting to work, getting home when it's dark, leaving home when it's dark.
Yeah.
Can be the depressing, like, trudgery of daily life. Oh dear.
Here in Korea in 2022, in the news just, I think, last week, they were talking about how more salaried workers are taking on extra jobs and moonlighting because they don't have enough money to pay the mortgage or to pay the bills because of inflation and interest rates.
It is awful, isn't it?
It is. So happy Wednesday, Peter.
Thank you, Paul, though, for your reading.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone. Thanks as always to the Literature Translation Institute of Korea for their help with copyright permission for this broadcast. Thank you to Bae Su-ah for her absorbing writing, and to Sora Kim Russell for her excellent translation. As always, next week we're going to The Impossible Fairy Tale by Han Yu-ju, translated by Janet Hong. The Impossible Fairy Tale will be next week's book.
Fabulous, Paul. Thanks a lot. We'll see you then.
I'll see you then. Goodbye.
You can listen to Check It Out with Paul Matthews on Arirang Radio's #DailyK every Wednesday from 10 a.m. KST.